After Puzzle Quest took me a long time to beat, here I thought that I could play something far shorter for the next video. Yeah, I thought wrong. I chose to play Dragon Sisters on the PlayStation 2, and while the game technically isn't long, it still took me a very long time to finish it. Well, almost finish it, but I will get to that. But before I dive into the game itself, Dragon Sisters is one of the simple 2000 games that were released outside of Japan. And lucky for us Europeans, we got the game, while North America, yeah, officially you never got it. Why actually? Were any simple 2000 games released in North America at all? I really don't understand why a specific region gets the game but another region doesn't. Just release it worldwide for fuck's sake. Well, but that's a topic for a different time. So back to Dragon Sisters. The version I got is the Italian PAL version. Why Italian? Well, it was the cheapest version I could get at the time, and as long as the game itself is in English, then I don't much care what language the manual is in. Sadly, I don't own the Japanese version, so I can't really compare both versions, but the Japanese version is called Simple 2000 Series The Senko Volume 87. You might also find it not under the Senko but under the Nadeshiko, and interestingly enough, Nadeshiko is actually the name of one of the characters in the game. So let's dive into the game itself. While on the main menu, it shows the two sisters, Kiku and Hana, and only two options, New Game and Load Game. But because the main menu is supposed to be really exciting, there is no background music at all, for some reason. First I thought that the game was broken or maybe too much dust or something, but no, that's just the way the game is. But starting a new game or simply loading it throws you into the actual menu, and there we go, background music. If you go for a new game entirely, you also get to read about the story in this game, with barely any visuals. And all the options you see here are all you get. Let's start with options. Well, there is nothing really interesting here, but what I find very disappointing is that there is no controller configuration. So yes, you have to find out for yourself what the buttons actually do. Or you take a look at the manual. Next, it's training, and this option is quite misleading, I think. Because what they mean by training is not you using the character to practice your moves, get used to the controls or whatever. What they actually mean is that you will level yourself up and unlock new moves. But for that to happen, you need to collect souls that you get by defeating enemies, which I will show you later. By using those souls, you can level up your strength or HP and learn new moves or increase your combo chain. The next one would be missions, but I will get to that later because first, let's dive into the story. Around 100 years after the Great War, the Empire, who I assume is the equivalent of Japan, strived with state-of-the-art technology. However, a fascist East Asian state decided to invade the empire and rob them from all their resources. While high on defense, the empire still couldn't resist the East Asian state attacks for long, and thus the empire was almost completely taken down, until two cyborgs by the name of Kiku and Hana appear to protect the empire. So, it's an actually very basic story, but it's not bad at all. Especially later in the game where a new character appears and we are able to dive deeper into the story. Still, it's nothing too complex, but good enough for what it is. However, I'm only talking about the point I reached in the game, which I will get to later in more detail. But essentially what I mean by this is that the third character you are able to unlock is the actual key for the story to fully unfold. Thing is this, if you've managed to beat the game with either Kiku or Hana, then you've beaten the game. Right? Technically you did. But you will notice that in the last mission you will fight Miss Vega and she runs away from you after her second phase. The first time I beat her, she ran away and your commander told you not to chase her, which confused me a bit because I thought that the goal was to defeat her. But when you unlock the third character, Miss Vega will have a third phase where she actually has to be defeated, which will result in the continuation of the story. So the story basically only continues with that third character, and that's something I quite like, because it gives you a reason to continue playing to find out who the mastermind actually is. You will play the basic story with Kiku and Hana, but Nadeshiko and Sakura, after you've unlocked them, are the ones that will let you dive in deeper into the lore. Nicely done, and this should be implemented more in games. However, while playing the story multiple times, Kiku and Hana basically have the same personality, which is quite a shame. Well, okay, they don't have the exact same personality, but there still isn't enough there to fully distinguish them. Nadeshiko and Sakura, on the other hand, are a completely different story. Now, before I go into the gameplay and stuff, let's look at the last option, missions. In the beginning, you will only have access to the first mission, out of 100 in total. Even if you have enough souls collected, you can only start to unlock the rest of the missions after you've beaten the game once with either Kiku or Hana. Why? Because you only get access to the Darkness expansion after beating the game once. And the souls you will need are the red ones, the green ones are health. Once you've beaten the game, you will need to pay 1000 souls per mission, until the last 10 or 11 missions where you need to pay 2000 souls for each. So it can be quite a grind, especially considering that you also need souls to upgrade the girls, which is why it also took me a long time to somewhat finish the game. If you manage to unlock every mission, the goals for each mission tend to be different, and as you can see here, I've completed all missions outside of 2. You will have no damage missions where you need to defeat everybody and not take any damage. Quite literally. These kind of missions can be a nightmare, especially against enemies that use guns against you. Low health missions where you start the mission with very low health, but at least you can get hit more than once if you get health from enemies. Flying missions where you will need to stay airborne for a specific period of time, which is beyond easy. Combo missions where you need to achieve a specific combo count. Among a few other mission types, finally there are the last form of missions, the ones that take 2000 souls to unlock each. Those are endurance missions, and by endurance I really mean endurance. While most other missions may take you just a few seconds up to maybe 10 minutes to beat, these ultra endurance missions may take you up to 1 hour. At least 2 of those will certainly take you up to 1 hour to beat each, so if you don't have any kind of patience to grind and upgrade the girls or fight for 1 hour, yeah, then move on. Unfortunately, I have no idea what you can unlock by beating all 100 of these missions because I'm missing 2, and one of which I simply cannot beat. I will explain why later, because this is an issue with the whole game and not that specific mission. Graphically, I don't need to say all that much here. For a low-budget game from 2005 in Japan and 2007 in Europe, the game looks quite fine despite it being interlaced and it having frame drops here and there. Sure, the girls have little to no expressions during battle or when they get defeated, but they don't look horrible. Actually, I think they look quite fine. Similar goes for the enemies, even though they will repeat and repeat and repeat. But to be fair, there is quite a fine variety of enemies here, and yes, they are all robots. You have the melee standard robots that get upgraded in later levels, flying robots with guns, running robots with guns, big robots with hammers or bazookas, suicide robots and a few more. So it's quite a variety, but since you will have to defeat hundreds and hundreds of robots, possibly even thousands depending if you beat the game 100%, it will seem there isn't much variety in the enemies. However, the bosses are quite a different story. They basically boil down to these 3 bosses, whatever the hell they are even supposed to be. But seeing how there are only 10 levels when playing with Kiku or Hana, these 3 bosses repeat 2 or 3 times each. Heck, in Mission 9 you will have to fight all 3 bosses back to back, which is really lazy. But then we have the main boss, Miss Vega. I mean, just look at her, she looks like a female version of Vega. I mean, this Vega. Yes, originally he's called Vega in Japan. Her real name is Sakura and she can be a headache to defeat, especially in her 3rd form. And yes, supposedly you can unlock her, but I never did. Why? I will get to that later. But she isn't the only main boss here, because once you've unlocked the 3rd character, Nadeshiko, and beat Sakura in mission 10, you will unlock her 11th mission, and here you will fight Hana. I assume that you will have to defeat Kiku and the main boss of the game as well later on, but that's something sadly I could not do. But okay, back to the graphics. It's low budget, but it looks quite okay, let's be honest. Sound, music and everything around it is also okay, but nothing more than that. There is absolutely nothing noteworthy here. The effects are fine, the main music is fine, the stage OSTs are fine, but repetitive, and the girls' voices, the ones that are there, are fine as well. And I could be wrong here, but I've seen some footage of the original Japanese version, and the girls there seem to say quite a bit more than in the European version, which is kinda weird. Well, overall, not many flaws or big disappointments to note up to now, right? Story is fine, characters are okay, it looks and sounds decent enough, it has a decent story, and mission mode offers a tiny bit of variety. And remember that this is a simple 2000 game. But now we will see some of the major flaws in the game, and it mostly has to do with the gameplay. Now, when you start, obviously you will start pressing buttons to see what they do, right? Square is punch, triangle is kick, X is jump, L1 and L2 are dash, R2 is reload, R3 is special, circle is relentless, and so on. Kiku specializes in punches while Hana goes for kicks. If you bought it on the training screen, then you can prolong Kiku's punch combos and Hana's kick combos. Sure, technically both girls can punch and kick, even as combos. The difference here is the so-called relentless, which is why I said that Kiku specializes in punches and Hana in kicks. Kiku can do kick combos, but she cannot use relentless after a kick combo, only after a punch combo. Which is why Nadeshiko is better than both Hana and Kiku, because she can use relentless after any combo. Relentless is basically a strong special move that can only be unleashed after a specific combo length. You can also use Relentless without doing a combo, which looks like she's recharging, but I still have no idea what it specifically does. I thought it would strengthen the attacks for a short period of time at least, but I didn't notice any difference in damage. Pressing R3 unleashes an Ultra, which is the same for every character. This attack destroys every enemy on screen in one blow that is near you, outside of bosses of course, but it will take a bit of health away from you. The dash should be obvious, press the button to avoid and escape enemy attacks, or move faster. Finally, reloading. To use Relentless you will need to have ammunition ready, because if you press circle once to use Relentless, you will lose up one ammo shell as seen here. So at some point you will need to reload, but pay attention, because you are highly vulnerable once you reload. If an enemy hits you while you are reloading, the reload doesn't count. The issue here is that while reloading, the girl stays still, and you necessarily have to let the animation play out. Now that we have the buttons down, let's take a look at the stages themselves. They are quite okay, but especially on this stage, just look at the cars. Do I need to say more? Come on, I think not. You will also fight in the obligatory sewer or underground level and in multiple elevator levels alongside the typical levels on the street. They use the elevator stages quite often, too often in fact. I've counted 3 or 4 missions out of 10 with the recycled elevators, as if the developers didn't have any other ideas for a stage. But that isn't the biggest problem, because just look at how the camera is positioned. And no, you can't change it. The camera is way too low, especially on this stage. This causes a lot of unnecessary problems. Firstly, because the camera is too low, you don't have a good view of the field and will have difficulty knowing exactly where the enemies are, at least when they are far from the camera. This will cause you to miss quite a few hits for no reason actually. Then it's the fact that the camera is essentially fixed. Sure, it moves horizontally in some stages, but that's about it, and ultimately it causes a problem because of what I've mentioned before, the fact that the camera is too low. Also because the camera is fixed, you are either far away from it or too close to it. Again, especially in this stage, the enemies will constantly hit you even though they aren't even on screen, so you won't even know where the hell they are, especially when you are too close to the camera. Worse though is when the enemy is not outside of the screen from the left or right, but from the front or from the bottom. This is what I mean. Notice how it seems like I am hitting the air, but in reality I am hitting an enemy that isn't even on screen yet, or he decided to step out of the screen. Yeah, that's bullshit the way they've done this. Or in this stage where you are far away from the camera and the enemies are directly in front of your face. Because of this, the enemy will block your entire view and you won't even know where you are or what hit you. Why does the camera need to be this way? Why does it need to be that low? Why does it need to be essentially fixed? Just why? Yeah, that's bullshit. Needless to say, the camera is a major issue here. But worse are the controls. How? While moving around is fine and all, when it comes to the normal enemies the issue is less noticeable, but the main bosses turn into a nightmare because of this. Your characters simply don't move fast enough. Notice how the girls need to turn around their body in the direction you are pressing before they can do what you want them to do. You may say that you don't see what the issue is and it actually would be okay the way it is, but not when the game requires fast movement for the majority of the time. If you want to change directions but you press the square button while the character is still in the middle of their turning around animation, then she will stop midway and attack in the direction you don't want. Especially while jumping, this turns into an issue. More so during boss battles, to the point where dash doesn't even help much. And mentioning dash, the jump forward you do with the dash seems too big many times. Now, if you want to move faster forward on the map, the dash is quite good. But if you just want to avoid enemy hits, move out of the way and quickly hit the enemy back. Then you will suddenly find yourself too far away from the enemy to do anything. But now, all of this is also an issue with the hit detection. Just look at these examples. Do I need to say more? The hit detection can be horrendous at times, which is why I had a lot of difficulty beating mission 69, could not beat mission 94, had difficulty beating Sakura's third phase, and couldn't beat Hana in story mission 11. Even the fight against this boss can turn into a headache because he basically always bites you no matter how far away you are from him in this elevator stage. And even if you manage to dash out of the way, it seems like your reaction time needs to be on ultra instinct mode and beyond precise because the window you have to be able to evade is way too short. Never mind when the enemy attacks you, he stops your hitting animation. You stay still and have to take the hit, while the boss usually still goes for the hit if you do the same. And another annoying part is that the characters can get dizzy as well. And by characters I mean you. Because the enemy never, but never gets dizzy, but you do often, which means you will take hits without being able to do anything. Yeah, that's bullshit. By the way, aren't the girls all cyborgs? So why the hell do they get dizzy in the first place? However, if you manage to beat the game with Kiku and Hana, you will unlock Nadeshiko. She supposedly is the mother of Kiku, Hana and even Sakura. But seemingly she is either being controlled by someone or maybe she is malfunctioning, I guess. You know, because the girls are all cyborgs and all. Also notice how Nadeshiko goes through the same levels Kiku and Hana did, but she has to fight way more enemies. With her, even during the bosses, the standard robots won't leave you alone. Which means that you won't be able to concentrate only on the boss, you will need to pay attention to the minions as well. Needless to say, Nadeshiko's playthrough is by far more challenging even on the easy difficulty, but granted, unlike Kiku and Hana, Nadeshiko can use Relentless after any kick or any punch, as I've mentioned. If you bought it first with souls, that is. And I assume that Sakura's playthrough is as hard or even harder as Nadeshiko's, but I haven't unlocked her and probably never will. I've managed to unlock the 11th stage with Nadeshiko where she has to fight Hana in the end, but since I cannot beat her because of the damn hit detection and the other things I've mentioned previously, I can only assume that there will be more stages above 11. But to annoy you even more, and no, I'm not done, because seemingly that's the point of the game at times, to really piss you off even more, is that the red souls often go through the floor, or just fall off outside of your reach. Sure, it mostly happens on mission 9 in the story mode, with the elevators, but just look at it! Furthermore, since you have to fight all 3 bosses back to back on mission 9, you will be forced to miss a lot of red souls because 2 of those bosses are way too big, and when they get defeated, they spread their legs and take up a lot of space on the elevator. That results them in blocking you from being able to collect all red souls, and I don't need to mention that those red souls are essentially your XP and mission 9 gives you the most of it. And finally, when you beat a boss on a level that is your very last enemy of that level, you only have a few seconds to collect all red souls. You see, it's quite a shame that this game isn't better than it actually is, because if they fixed just the hit detection and the movement speed, then Dragon Girls could almost be on the level of Onechanbara and probably could have branched out into its own franchise. You know, like Onechanbara and Earth Defense Force did. It clearly had potential for more, and if I take some issues out of it, the game can be quite fun. Sure, very monotonous, but still somewhat fun, which is why it took me a long time to reach the point I did in the game. Mission 69 alone took me over a week to beat. Granted, maybe it would be easier to play and beat the whole game with 2 players, which is something you can do, but I played by myself with 60 Hz. That's another thing, you can choose between 50 Hz and 60 Hz before starting the game. In the end though, this game had so much potential it actually hurts me a little to see it not going anywhere.